Hi, I'm Lauren Hamilton, accountant for therapists. Today I wanted to talk about a big topic amongst therapists in private practice and group practices, all things practice, which is deciding on whether to be a private pay therapist or take insurance. You can also obviously have a hybrid model, but a lot of times therapists are deciding between, do you just want to be strictly private pay or do you also want to accept insurance? So let's jump into it. So, one thing to think about as you're kind of going through this decision making process is, there's no one right way to do this. Some therapists, like I said, may have strictly private pay, some may strictly do insurance, and some may do a little bit of both. It just kind of depends on your situation and what you have going on and what type of clientele you're seeing. So there are going to be a lot of factors that go into this outside of, just kind of thinking of it from a financial standpoint. But one of the first things to kind of think about is just, is it cash flow predictability? Is it an admin load? Is it, like I said, client accessibility and, a burnout risk? So you do just kind of want to think through those things as you are going through this decision. So let's talk about kind of maybe the pros and cons of taking insurance. So one major pro in that column is just easier client acquisition. A lot of people who are new to therapy, who are coming into it based on maybe a recommendation, or they're just, kind of getting their feet wet in it, think that it has to go through insurance. And sometimes it's just about educating the client that depending on who they want to see and who they click with, that may not necessarily be an insurance based decision. However, like I said, a pro for taking insurance, you do get more visibility with clients that way. It also just increases their accessibility for coming to see you. There's also kind of this notion of income stability. When you're working with an insurance, you feel like you've got a steady connection there, so your income stream may not get shut off quite as easily. The last pro is, it feels like your values may be aligned with taking insurance. Because again, depending on your clientele and who you're seeing, maybe those are the type of people that you want to reach out to. And not that there's a stereotype, I guess, when I say that. I'm just saying, as far as, again, your reach and maybe the people that you are wanting to help, and maybe they are more accessible through an insurance based intake. Let's talk about the other side of the coin there, where there's some cons to taking insurance. There is a lower reimbursement rate, so obviously insurance is going to take their cut from what your hourly rate is. There probably will be some delayed payments and cash flow lag. I do hear that quite a bit from other therapists, that it just takes a long time to see your income come into your bank. Then you also might have to work through claim denials or rework claims. There is probably going to be more admin time with that, which just means that you're going to have less billable time and less time with your clients. And then the amount of income you're receiving from it versus the amount of effort you're putting into it may be a little bit of a hidden cost there, being that, you're putting in a lot more work than what you're actually getting back. So from a financial standpoint, maybe insurance is maybe not the best way to go. Again, that's going to depend on your situation. And, you really want to think through those things. And maybe if you're just getting started and you're still kind of new to the whole game, then that might be something that's a little bit more comforting to you. And that's okay. And that's, how you should get started, is doing something that you're comfortable with, and, really get into the, business side of things and just learning what's going to work for you. So even though these are, kind of pros and cons, it's not, you need to decide what's going to weigh your scale. Like maybe some of the cons don't matter as much to you, and, that really won't affect your decision either way. So now let's go through private pay and some of the pros and cons of that method. So the pros there are, potentially higher fees per session, because you're going to be, obviously the direct recipient of all of that. You might see faster and more predictable payments, especially if you charge people up front before the therapy session. So that way you don't get through a whole session and then, they refuse to pay you. Obviously there could be situations where refunds or something like that might come into play, but that's not really what we're talking about here. I will say it does make for cleaner bookkeeping and accounting because you're not waiting for insurances to come in or, lag times or anything like that. You just have pretty much an automatic money in, money out situation. So it makes your accounting and finances a lot easier to read and manage. Another big pro is that you have more autonomy over that, where you can set your rates and your policies and your schedule. You're not, bound by what the insurance companies, what their policies are. You may also be able to conduct fewer sessions. So if you're at a point where your weeks are just jam-packed full of sessions and, you still feel like you're not able to make those financial goals possible for you, then, being private pay may sometimes offer you, as you're charging maybe a little bit more of a rate, then you can decrease your sessions per week at that point because you're going to be earning more. So then let's talk about the cons for private pay. So obviously there's probably going to be a little bit of a slower ramp up. That's going to be more effort for you to, go out and find clients. And some people who, are looking for therapists and hear that you only are private pay and don't take insurance, that might be something that they're not interested in. So your clientele population may be decreased because of that. You do have a marketing responsibility for that. So you will have to take on more of that for marketing and finding your clients. There could be some client objections around affordability. That kind of goes back to the slower ramp up in the marketing. It's just about making sure that you're messaging correctly and getting your value across to people so that way they feel like when they are spending time with you that it is a worth investment for them. And, a con, I kind of hate saying it's a con, but it is something that you will kind of have to think through, is just evaluating your confidence in your value. And do you feel confident going out there and saying, this is my private pay rate and this is what it costs to come and see me and get my help for your situation? So that I think would be hard for anybody, especially if you're newer to the practice or, newer to starting your practice. So being able to kind of get your sea legs with that and feeling confident in the value that you actually do bring to your clients. So just to kind of wrap up, I don't want private pay to, that decision is a struggle, I think, for a lot of people because we're just so traditionally in the mindset that insurance is always the way to go for things. But I think now in our industry and as things are changing, and especially in America, at least, in the way insurance is conducted here, a lot of people are getting frustrated with things. And so people who want to work with a specific person is more willing now to go outside of insurance to work with that person. So I do think that there is a trend of, private pay being maybe not as scarce or, not as unheard of in this time or, in our industry right now. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have fewer clients. It just means that you're going to be a little bit more intentional about who you are seeing and who you're serving and how you want your practice to be, and really looking inward and thinking about what is it that you built your practice for, what is it that you are wanting to help people with, and really focusing on that so that way you are reaching those people in particular that you are wanting to serve. Another helpful tip for making this decision is, just working through the numbers, and without a whole lot of complicated spreadsheets or calculations or anything like that. Some of the things that you may just even want to write down, if you want to make like a a graph on a piece of paper and, just have like this side insurance and this side private pay, and just talk about maybe what your effective hourly rate is for each option. Not necessarily, like a sticker price, but does it feel right to you if you charge this amount for your private pay and this is the amount that you're earning for insurance? Does that align with what you feel like your value is for that hour of time, or, that session that you are providing to people? You might also want to think about how many sessions a week you're potentially going to have. What would that look like on a private pay model versus an insurance model? And thinking through, is that going to be sustainable for you? Are you already feeling burnt out, or do you feel like there's going to come a time when you're going to have to reevaluate your decision, which, like most of us, it's not a one size fits all. So even if you decide to go in one direction today, that doesn't necessarily mean that that will be the direction for the rest of your practice career longevity. You can, always reassess that. You also probably want to think about monthly overhead and admin time. So how much time is it going to take you to go through the insurance process versus your own billing and like receivable process that you'll have on a private pay system? You may also think about, if you go an insurance route, maybe you want to have a billing specialist that will handle all of those insurance claims and adjustments and all the things that come with that. So then thinking about, that's going to be an overhead cost if you're seeking out an assistant or billing specialist for that. But you may also do that on the private pay side. You may find somebody who can help you just send out bills and invoices to your customer or to your clients. And so that could also be an overhead cost. So just kind of thinking through those items there. And then just overall your emotional bandwidth. Like when you kind of come down from the logistical side of it and you think about private pay, like what does that bring up in your body? What does that feel like? What are some of the thoughts that are running through your mind? Maybe that's something you want to just write out real quickly just to get it out of your head. And do the same thing when you talk about insurance. What does that feel like? What does that bring up for you? And maybe that will also help you make a decision there, because if it doesn't feel right to you to be a private pay therapist, then maybe that's not the direction for you, and insurance is the better path for you now. There is no right or wrong answer to this. The next option is, I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, is maybe doing a hybrid method. Maybe you are currently taking insurance and you're not sure that you want to go completely private pay. I think it would be smart to maybe do that just with a few clients, see how it goes, see how that process is, see what the feedback is that you get from that. Or if you talk to your clients that you're currently seeing and asking them, even though you're with me on insurance, if I were to go private pay, is that something that you would want to continue to see me and work with me, even though it wouldn't go through your insurance? And maybe just kind of do some research on it, that way. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation either. So you could test it out and then see, well, maybe you really don't like private pay. Maybe you want to stay with the insurance side of things. And that's great. Then you know exactly what you're doing is the way you want to be running your practice. Let's say that you do have private pay and you like that model and you like how it's going. Maybe then that can kind of help you start to phase out insurance over time. Whereas maybe you just drop one carrier. And like I said, maybe you can still work with the clients that are going through insurance and maybe they want to switch to private pay because they want to continue to work with you. So I think you might be surprised at how that could look if you just talk to your clients now and just maybe kind of get their feedback from it. So as we're kind of finalizing or thinking about some last items as we're making a decision, think about how many clients you can realistically see each week. How do you feel about admin work? Do you already feel like you're swamped and just overwhelmed with that? Maybe that's not something more that you want to take on. Maybe that is something that you want to start reaching out to, an assistant or a billing specialist or something like that. Maybe that's a good avenue for you to go. Also thinking about what level of income you're wanting to achieve to feel safe, and thinking through that and maybe what those goals can look like and how these methods can help you achieve that. And thinking through growth, like what do you want to see your practice in 1 to 3 years? Is that seeing a lot of people, or maybe being very specific about the type of person that you're seeing, and you only want to have like 5 sessions a week or whatever that is, whatever that looks like to you. you, just thinking about where you're wanting that to look in, a few years, or maybe what your dream practice would look like, and then kind of working backwards to put a plan together as to how you can get there. I think a lot of times we don't recognize that we're in burnout until we're there and we're like kind of past the point of no return. I know I can speak to that personally. Some days I'm like, yes, everything's working, I'm doing good, and blah, blah, blah. And then like the next day I'm like, whew, I did not see that coming. And it just kind of comes out of nowhere. So I think learning more about what are the signs and some of the things that you want to be intentional about taking time to have a break and making sure that you're doing intentional breaks. And depending on what that might look like for you, developing that into your decision to make sure that your income model or method fits that, or how you can make it work within the model that you do choose. So I think that's very important too, because even not just therapists, but business owners in general, we all need to be thinking about that and, keeping that in mind, because we can't do the work that we love doing if we're burnt out and just overwhelmed with everything. So we want to not get to that point. So I hope that helped kind of help you think through your decision as you're thinking through private pay versus insurance. What's the best thing for me? Again, these were not tips by all means to, sway you one way or another. It's just some things to get you thinking about what your practice looks like and what your decisions are going to be and what your goals are going to be for your practice. And these are your numbers and your values, and all of that matters. So take that into account when you're thinking through this. And again, I've said this a couple of times now, not one size fits all. And the decision that you make today is not going to be the decision that you might make 1 to 3 years from now. And that's okay too. So it really is about thinking through your practice and your needs and the effect on the world that you want to have in your work. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please like and share it so that way we can continue to reach other therapists who are working through a similar decision like you. I am always happy to talk more about anything finance and accounting related. So please reach out to me if you do have those questions. And until next time, be well.